A perfect storm refers to a confluence of events that result in a positive or negative outcome. Events described as a perfect storm include downturns in the financial markets, upsets in sports, and unexpected outcomes in military operations. But nowhere has the phrase, a perfect storm, been a better description about the demise of safety and security in our communities. We see a level of crime and violence with no consequences that gives all of us a reason to pause and reconsider the role of and the relationship we have with police services. So the question is, are we collectively ready to address the level of crime and violence taking place today? And if so, what are the priorities in rebuilding our relationship with police services?
We all agree that we needed to make changes in law enforcement. Criminal justice reform had to happen. But now that we've gone to the extreme side, let's bring it back a little bit. You know, we've done some reforms, some laws have been passed in California in particular that I think were probably necessary, needed. But now we need to think about crime prevention and crime solving.
My name is Jim Connor. Welcome to Game Changers, Silicon Valley. My guest is Chief Angela Averiett, who is the new Chief of Police in Los Altos, California, in the heart of Silicon Valley. Chief Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're the first law enforcement guest I've ever had on this show, and I applaud your willingness to join us in the conversation. You've literally worked your way up through the ranks to where you are today. Can you give us a sense of what led you to make this commitment to a career in law enforcement?
I never thought I would be on this path to law enforcement, to be honest. I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot, but I didn't make enough money to take flying lessons. So I started my career at the Hayward Police Department as a records clerk so that I could make enough money to be able to take flying lessons. I went on a ride-along while I was a clerk, and that changed the trajectory of my entire life. So I started as a sworn officer at the Alameda County Sheriff's Office as a deputy, then went back to Hayward PD as an officer. I worked there for the bulk of my career, promoted through different ranks, and then went to the BART Police Department in 2019. I was there for about 3.5 years, and then got promoted to chief here in Los Altos. So my career took some twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. You know, I had planned to stay at Hayward PD for the rest of my life until I retired, and you know, sometimes God has different plans for you. So I'm grateful to be where I am right now.
Yeah, well, we're grateful to have you, but I have to ask you about this inflection moment on the ride-along. What was that? Must have been a fairly important event.
It was, and when you talk about the perfect storm, for me it was the perfect storm. The reason why I went on the ride-along is because I was so nervous being around police officers. I had never been around guns before, and every time they would walk by me, I would feel anxiety. And so I felt that I needed to go on a ride-along to understand them and understand the job that they did. And the ride-along was actually super boring, to be honest. But it was so exciting to me because I had never been in a car with a police officer. And seeing how the community reacted to the officer really touched me. And, you know, the ability of the officer to really help people in need is what sparked my desire to become a police officer.
That's amazing. I mean, you and I did not talk about this. That you were scared, or you were intimidated, probably is the best word.
100%, yes. And I wasn't expecting that. I just figured I'd be working in a police department, you know, shuffling papers. And literally from day one, when I met the first officer, I was nervous. And I understand why people are nervous when they see an officer in uniform. I had that same experience.
You had nothing to hide either, right?
No, I didn't. Or at least I don't think I did.
Okay, good. Well, we got a lot to talk about. And one of the big ones is this change in the laws. We've had a lot of laws go from felony to misdemeanors. And they're pretty serious laws. I've had a few other guests on who told me, hey, this thing was about assault and this thing about various types of other felonies are now misdemeanors. And now there's not that much attention paid to misdemeanors. What's your opinion? Is that hurting police services, that type of change?
Yes, it is, actually. I understand the need for reform, especially after the events of 2020. I think everyone in law enforcement can agree that changes had to be made. The problem, though, is that we made a lot of knee-jerk reactions to those things that happened in 2020, and even prior to that, a little prior to that. But the consequences now are that because some of these felonies have been knocked down to misdemeanors, people that are committing certain crimes feel like there's no punishment. There's no consequence for their action. And so they're turning into repeat offenders, and literally nothing is happening to them. They're being put on multiple probations, Well, if they break their probation, then they just get on another probation, right? And so it's been frustrating as law enforcement officers not having that ability to take, offenders off the street, to keep our community safe, because that's really what it is about at the end of the day.
Yeah. If you're a multiple, let's say, misdemeanor offender, naming shoplifting, excessive, and stealing, and what have you, is it up to the prosecution, the prosecutor's office, to do something more serious, or because it's out of your hands at that point, isn't it?
It is out of our hands at that point.
Yeah.
It really depends. So the DA's office has the decision whether or not to charge the individual, but then it goes a step further, and it's on the judge now to decide, what that person's punishment is going to be. And so we all need to work together better, I think, to not only reform the justice system, but also to bring it back to center. I feel like we've made some changes that have affected our communities very negatively. The crime rate, I'll say Bay Area wide, has really gone up since the pandemic. And so we have to come together to figure out what we need to do to combat, this crime.
Yeah. I had a fellow on last week, Ted Stroll, who's running for assembly in state of California for District 25 in San Jose. He's a attorney that did research for the Supreme Court. And what he's saying, and he said this on the show, there's been unintended consequences of these laws. They started out
Yes.
with the right intention,
100%.
but they've gone astray.
Yes.
And we as a state have got to come back and revisit them, and that's one of the biggest issues. Maybe there's a certain element that we're proponents of those, and now it's gone astray. They don't even want to go back and revisit. I think we as the citizens, we have an election coming up. We might be able to express our opinions in that election.
I think that's a smart smart idea.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
So one of the biggest challenges for you is got to be recruitment.
Yes.
And, we talked a little bit earlier, and I was saying, I mean, it's so tough to be a police officer today. I'll let you maybe give me your sense of the challenges of recruitment, and what can we as citizens do to express appreciation to officers we see?
Well, let's start with the recruitment. So I feel like right now society is almost indifferent to law enforcement and to police work. 25 years ago when I started, there would literally be thousands of people testing for 2 positions. Now it's the opposite, right? We may have like hundreds of positions in the Bay Area, and only a couple of people are interested in it. I think it goes to, when you compare law enforcement where you work weekends, holidays, nights, you may miss birthdays and all those kind of things, or you can work, somewhere else like, in Silicon Valley and work from home, right? So your quality of life is different. And so that's the challenge that we're up against. It pays well. We have a great retirement and all that, but that's not what is important to people right now. What's important is their quality of life. And so we're trying to figure out creative ways to balance both, right? To show people that, yes, you can do this job and still have a life outside of law enforcement. Now, as far as the community showing support for us, I think there are several things that they can do. And I hate saying they, because honestly, I feel like law enforcement is the community, right? I think, when we're out on the street, just waving to us, with all 5 fingers is great. Saying hello, telling an officer thank you for your service or thank you for what you do. In that moment, you may not think it's a big deal, but it's a really big deal to us because we don't hear it enough. Unfortunately, we hear and we see more negativity towards us than the positive side. So, and also when we do things in the community like Coffee with the Cops, things like that, having people come out and just have conversations with us is really important.
I have to admit, I've seen some police officers at Starbucks in different places, and I wanted to go up, frankly, but I wasn't sure, I really wasn't sure, and I have no reason to be intimidated or, quote, fearful, but I just didn't get the sense that they were quite open to me walking up. And I'm not saying that's their fault, that's my read on the situation, but I did have this experience, which I mentioned to you, where I was stopped at a red light, and there was a policeman there, and I rolled down the window and said, I want to thank you for your service, and he beamed. He was just so excited.
That made his day, I'm sure.
And so I think all of us can do a lot more of that, especially in these challenging times where society's, elements of society have gotten out of control a little bit, and there's more challenges to police doing their job correctly and appropriately than ever before.
Yes, 100%. And I also think, when you said you're in Starbucks and, you want to go up to the officer, but you're not sure, I think it's because the way that we're trained to have command presence, right? To kind of take control of situations. And so it's kind of hard to drop that front, right? But the second you say hello to an officer, our human side comes out. We can't help that. So I do think that sometimes this uniform can be a barrier to conversation.
Can be, yeah. I wanted to bring some of my personal experiences in because I did ask you about this. That should any of us get stopped, when you're stopped, and this is kind of a public comment, put your hands up on the wheel for sure. Now, other ones, as I mentioned, said put your hands out, put your window down, your hands out. But you said hands on the wheel is best.
Yes, and the reason why I say that is because in law enforcement, it's almost like two different countries between Northern California and Southern California. The way that they police in Southern California is slightly different. So in Southern California, is probably perfectly normal for you to put your hands out the window. Here in Northern California, when you do that, it raises a little suspicion on our end. Why are they putting their hands out the window? That's not a normal response, is what I'm getting at. So the best thing to do is to put your hands on the wheel, follow the officer's instructions, obviously. If you're going to reach into the glove box to retrieve anything, tell the officer, I'm going to reach into the glove box to get the registration now, or I'm reaching in my pocket to get my wallet, things like that. But the most important thing on a traffic stop to remember is in that moment, that's not the time to argue about the ticket, right? We have certain things in place so that if you want to file a complaint, you can ask for a supervisor. You can call after the traffic stop is completed and file a complaint. There are mechanisms in place to investigate misconduct. But in that moment, the officer needs to be able to keep control of the situation, handle business, and then leave. And so when people become argumentative, it just escalates the situation unnecessarily.
Okay, so now one of the big things I really want to get into this area is police, not only do you have changes because of different laws and so on, you have challenges from society and different elements, political elements, but you have technology changes too.
Yes.
So to what extent are you looking at technology changes, or maybe you can tell us what they are and what you're considering to make police work safer and more secure and perhaps more efficient?
Great question. So let's go back 10 to 12 years. The big technology was the body-worn cameras, right? We were all very skeptical of them. We weren't sure how this was going to work. And it was a big change for us, kind of feeling like Big Brother was there, on our shoulder, watching every move that we make. Turns out it was the best thing that could have ever happened to law enforcement because I think it really adds transparency. Now, there are some flaws in that it can't capture every angle of an officer's perspective on what they see. It can't capture what they smell or even sometimes what they hear. However, I think it makes us more professional, and also the people that we're dealing with kind of puts them on notice also, like they're being filmed, right? So that was a great technology move for us as a whole to do that. Right now, I think drones are like the next best thing. There are many uses for drones. We can use drones to search for missing people. We can use drones to respond to calls for service and kind of do an overwatch over, let's say it's a burglary alarm. We can send a drone to kind of look over the house to see if there are any vehicles or people moving around or anything like that. We don't have drones right now in Los Altos, but that is some emergent technology that I think can really help ensure that our officers are being safe, but also keeping the community safe as well.
Yeah, so it sounds like if I see something going on, I make a call, you can have a drone there in a matter of a minute or two, but much quicker than you could get an officer to drive there.
Yes.
And then you've got footage, if you will.
Exactly.
Very
yes.
good. And then that you can communicate with the drone and see what's going on and do something, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But we talked about license plate technology. Is that something you're looking forward to doing? Is that a help?
Yes, so I actually just got back from the International Association of Chiefs of Police conference. It was held in Dallas. And some of that license plate reader technology, some of those companies were there. It's fascinating to see what the capabilities of these systems are. I know a lot of people have concerns about privacy, but it's not a Big Brother thing. It's not that we're checking everyone's license plates and we're going to go to their house and do an investigation on them. It's nothing like that. We don't have time for that anyways. What it does is it takes a picture of a license plate and runs it through different systems. And if we get what we call a hit on the license plate, like if it's a stolen car or if it was a car that was used in a crime, then it will alert law enforcement. In talking to other agencies that do have that technology, they've all said that their crime solvability rate has gone up tremendously. So I think it's a very effective tool that we can use, as long as we use it responsibly.
Was there a general discussion about the state of the country? Like we're going to hold on tight for the next year or two, or we're going to see what happens if the politicians can change things, or legislators can change some of these laws around, or we're in close contact with legislatures maybe, and the governor maybe, to do something about these laws that haven't quite worked out. Did that take place?
Yes, absolutely. I think, like I'll go back to my earlier comment that we all agree that we needed to make changes in law enforcement. Criminal justice reform had to happen. But now that we've gone to the extreme side, let's bring it back a little bit. We've done some reforms, some laws have been passed in California in particular that I think were probably necessary, needed. But now we need to think about crime prevention and crime solving, right? And so what kind of laws can we enact to give us more tools to be able, to really keep our community safe and to keep people off the street that shouldn't be out there because they're victimizing other people?
If I see, or any citizen or any resident, frankly, sees something going on, taking place, is it a 911 call, or is there another way to contact the police?
Yes, so all police departments have 911 and a non-emergency number.
Okay.
If you're not sure, I always say just call 911. That's the best thing to do. I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want there to be any sort of delay in responding to something. And something can start off kind of minor and escalate very quickly, right? And so I just say, if you don't know, if you're ever in doubt, just call 911.
Well, I have another question about me personally, and, because I've thought about this. And if I saw a crime happen right in front of me, walking down the street, maybe some guy's beating up somebody, assault, I would tend to just say, stop, either verbally or even interact. Is that the wrong thing to do?
That's a really hard question because you know what you're capable of, right? And also, the thing is, you don't know if this person is armed. That's how you should approach every situation like that. Just assume that maybe they're armed. I think it's very, very valiant to try to step in and help someone, but I think the best thing to do is to be a witness and to call 911 right away and let law enforcement come in and take care of it. Then, if you can, give a good description, the direction of travel, exactly what's happening, because sometimes people don't describe in that moment exactly what's happening, I think, because they're so nervous.
Well, you've been great, Chief. I really appreciate it. What would be your final message to the community here? This is Los Altos, but Mountain View and all the rest of the communities around here. Any message you'd like to give them?
Yes, my message is to please work with us in law enforcement. We are not the enemy. We've been villainized a lot the last couple of years in particular, and there's no doubt that we have issues within the ranks, right? We have issues that we are all working very hard to overcome. We're working hard to make sure that we're always professional, that we treat people with respect, and that we are equitable, all those things. But it's very difficult for us to do our jobs without the support of our communities. I mean, I don't think people truly understand that. We have to have the support of our communities. I can't do my job without the community, right? And so just, being there for us and supporting us and providing us with information when things happen, those are all critical. Some people say, well, I don't want to bother the police. Just bother us.
Really? Okay.
Yes, because we need the help.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for coming in, because you coming in and sitting down and explaining this perspective has given me considerably new insights, and I'm sure to our audience also.
Wonderful.
And I've not had anybody from the police departments willing to do this in the past, so my congratulations to you.
Oh, well, no, thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I think any opportunity that I get to speak to the community, as a whole, it's a wonderful opportunity. And, whether I'm, good, bad, right, or wrong, I'm here. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity.
Thanks for joining us in this episode. If you gained insights from this conversation, share this podcast with your network. You can comment or view the complete library of all shows at our website, gamechangers.tv. We welcome your continued interest and participation in upcoming shows.